For weeks, he watched her disappear. Same days, same hours, coming back with swollen eyes and shaking hands, quietly asking for pieces of her salary before payday. She had worked in his home for 2 decades without ever asking for a single thing. So when she slipped out one evening with her coat already buttoned, he made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. What he found at the end of that journey broke through every wall he had spent years carefully building around himself. Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel. Before we go any further, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe so you never miss a story. And we would love to know where in the world you are watching from right now. Are you in London, Toronto, Atlanta, maybe somewhere in the Philippines or New Zealand? Drop it in the comments. We read every single one. Marcus Elliot was 44 years old and controlled more square footage of Manhattan real estate than most people would ever set foot in. He could read a balance sheet the way other men read a newspaper, quickly, fluently, catching every number that was even slightly out of place. He had built Elliot Technologies from a 2-person startup in a Brooklyn apartment into a company with offices on 4 continents. He noticed everything that moved money. He had somehow never noticed the woman who kept his world from falling apart. Her name was Elena. She had come to work for his family 21 years ago, when his son Nathan was barely 3 and Marcus's wife Caroline was already sick for the first time. Elena had walked through the door of that apartment on the Upper East Side, quiet and steady and capable in a way that had felt, back then, like an answered prayer. When Caroline went through her first round of treatment, Elena made sure Nathan had a warm dinner every evening and someone to tuck him in. When Caroline went through her second round, Elena sat with the boy through his nightmares. When she died and Marcus responded the only way he knew how, by pouring himself so completely into work that grief had no room to find him, Elena made sure his son still had someone to come home to. She had loved that family with everything she had for 21 years, asking nothing in return beyond what she was owed. Marcus had never once asked about hers. Then, roughly 7 weeks before everything changed, he started noticing things he couldn't explain. Elena was leaving on Tuesdays and Thursdays, not a few minutes early but sometimes a full hour, coming back in the evenings with red eyes and a heaviness in her movements that had never been there before. Her hands, which had always been steady and precise when she set his morning coffee down on the desk, had developed a small tremor. Nothing dramatic, just a slight unsteadiness that he caught in the corner of his eye and filed away without meaning to. Then came the salary requests. $80 one week, $120 the next. Elena, who had worked in his home for over 2 decades and never once asked for anything before it was due, was now quietly, carefully, asking to access small portions of her pay early. He had checked the household accounts immediately, not out of suspicion exactly, but because Marcus Elliot checked everything. Every receipt was accounted for. Nothing was missing. Elena was not taking from him. But something was wrong. He could feel it the way he felt a deal going sideways before any of the numbers confirmed it, a low and persistent signal in the background that his mind refused to stop processing. He tried to reason with himself. This was Elena. The woman who had held his son through the worst nights of his childhood. She deserved his trust, not his surveillance. But Marcus had not built what he built by being comfortable with unanswered questions. And so on a Thursday evening when he spotted her heading for the door at 5:15 with her coat already on and her bag over her shoulder, he waited 30 seconds, then followed her out into the city. She walked 2 blocks north and descended into the subway. Marcus followed, staying far enough back that he could watch without being seen, feeling strangely out of place on the crowded platform in his tailored wool coat while the evening rush surged around him. Elena sat on the train with her hands folded tightly in her lap, her lips moving the faintest bit, like someone saying words they needed to keep saying just to keep themselves together. He watched her from across the car and felt something uncomfortable settle in the center of his chest. They rode for 25 minutes. When she stepped off and came up out of the subway into the cool evening air, Marcus stopped on the pavement and felt his stomach drop. He knew this street. He knew the building Elena was walking toward. He had been here before, years ago, in a different life, holding his wife's hand in a corridor that smelled of antiseptic and quiet fear. NYU Langone Medical Center. He followed her past the main entrance, around the side of the building, to a quieter door with a small sign above it in plain blue lettering. He had to slow his pace to read it. Oncology and Infusion Services. Marcus stopped walking. People moved past him on the pavement, the city doing what it always did, moving without sentiment in every direction. He stood still for a moment longer than he meant to. Then he walked through the door. The corridor inside was hushed and softly lit. Elena moved through it with the ease of someone who had walked this path many times, nodding to a nurse at the station, turning without hesitation into a room near the far end of the hall. The door drifted partially closed behind her but did not catch. Marcus walked slowly toward it. Through the gap he could see a small room, and in the room a hospital bed, and in the bed a boy, no more than 15 or 16, thin in the particular way that hurts to look at, and 4 lines running into his forearm, dark hollows beneath his eyes. Elena sat down beside the bed. She took the boy's hand in both of hers, leaned forward, and said something softly that reached Marcus just clearly enough to hear. "Mijo. Abuela is here." Marcus stopped breathing. A nurse entered the room from the other side, a clipboard in her hands and a voice that was professional but kind. "Mrs. Reyes, I'm sorry to bring this up this evening, but we still need to discuss the financial arrangements for Leo's next treatment phase." The words hit Marcus like a door opening onto something he had not been prepared to see. Financial arrangements. Next treatment phase. He stepped back from the doorway. He pressed his back against the corridor wall and stood very still. The hospital moved quietly around him, the soft percussion of machines, the murmur of nurses, the distant sound of someone somewhere having the worst night of their life. And through the gap in the door, he heard the boy's voice, weak but making a real effort to be cheerful. "Abuela, stop worrying. I'm fine. You always worry too much." Marcus looked down at his own hands. His watch caught the fluorescent light of the corridor. He looked away from it. He turned and walked back down the hall, back through the quiet door, back out into the noise and indifference of the city. He found a bench just outside the entrance and sat on it. Taxis swept past. A bus groaned at the corner. The city rumbled endlessly beneath his feet. He sat there without moving, and for the first time in many years, Marcus Elliot had absolutely no idea what to do with himself. He was still on that bench 45 minutes later when he heard footsteps and looked up. Elena had come through the entrance doors and stopped dead on the pavement 3 feet in front of him. She stared at him. He stared back. Neither of them spoke. The hospital doors slid open and closed behind her as other people came and went, the world operating normally around the two of them, frozen in this moment. Then Elena's face did something Marcus had never seen it do. It crumpled at the edges, just for a second, before pulling itself back together with the practiced control of someone who had been holding things in place through sheer force of will for a very long time. "Mr. Elliot." Her voice was quiet and careful. "I can explain." She stood completely still, her bag held in front of her with both hands, her chin slightly raised, waiting for whatever was coming. Marcus stood up slowly. He was a tall man, and in his dark coat he looked the way he usually looked, composed and contained and entirely in control. But his eyes were different tonight. Elena saw it immediately. She had spent 21 years learning to read this household, and she could see it clearly. These were not the eyes of an angry man. These were the eyes of someone who had seen something that rearranged him. "Elena," he said, and his voice came out quieter than he had intended. "You don't need to explain anything. Not out here." She blinked. That was not what she had prepared herself for. "I thought," she started. "I know what you thought," he said. "You thought I was going to let you go." Elena said nothing. But her grip on her bag tightened almost imperceptibly, and Marcus saw it, and it told him everything. He looked toward the street for a moment. Then he looked back at her. "Can we sit somewhere?" he asked. "Please." There was a small coffee shop half a block from the hospital, the kind that existed specifically because hospitals never close and the people who love hospital patients need somewhere warm to wait. It had amber lighting and small round tables and paper napkins and smelled of dark coffee and something sweet baking in the back. Marcus held the door open. Elena walked through ahead of him, which felt strange to her. She was always the one holding doors for him. They sat near the window. A young man came to take their order. Marcus asked for black coffee. Elena asked for chamomile tea, and the way she asked for it, without looking at the menu, told him it was the thing she always ordered when she needed to breathe. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The coffee shop hummed softly around them. Rain had begun tapping against the glass. Then Elena placed both hands flat on the table, took one breath, and started talking. "His name is Leo," she said. "He is my grandson. He turned 16 in January. His mother, my daughter Sophia, passed away 3 years ago. A car accident on her way home from a night shift at the hospital where she worked as a technician. After that, Leo came to live with me." She paused. "He is a very good boy. Smart in a way that makes you stop and look at him twice. He wants to study aerospace engineering." Something crossed Marcus's face at that, brief and quiet as a shadow. 8 months ago, Elena continued, Leo started getting tired very quickly. Bruising easily. He fainted during his school's physical education class and they called me. She looked at the table. The doctors found leukemia. The word settled between them. Marcus had not heard it applied to someone close to him since Caroline, and her illness had been different, but he knew the weight of the word. He knew exactly what it meant for a family. They started treatment immediately, Elena said. The first phase went reasonably well. But his type of leukemia, the doctors say the next phase requires a more intensive approach. A targeted therapy that has significantly better outcomes. She stopped. The insurance I carry through the agency covers a portion of it. How much of the gap is left? Marcus asked. Elena looked up at him. For a moment she seemed to weigh whether to answer, as if the number were a wound she wasn't sure she was ready to expose. Then she said it. Marcus did not react visibly. But something inside him went completely still. The number Elena named was not a number that would register as a problem for a man in his position. He had spent more than that hosting a single dinner for clients. The watch on his wrist was worth more than that. And yet Elena had been rationing her own salary, asking for small advances, choosing carefully between one expense and another, trying to reach that number by herself, $1 at a time, for 8 months. You've been carrying this alone, Marcus said. It was not a question. Yes, she said simply. Why didn't you tell me? Elena was quiet. She turned her cup slowly in her hands and looked out the window at the rain falling on the street. Then she said, because it is not your problem to carry, Mr. Elliot. You pay me to do a job. I do my job. What happens in my own life outside of your home is not something I would place on you. She looked at him directly. I am not saying this to make you feel badly. I am saying it because it is how I thought about it. You have carried your own grief for years. I have mine. They are different and I did not want to bring mine to your door. She paused. I did not want you to look at me and feel sorry for me. I did not want that to be the thing between us. Pity, Marcus said quietly. She met his eyes. Yes. Marcus walked home that night, all 14 blocks of it, even though Thomas his driver had offered to come. He needed the cold and the noise and the wet pavement. He needed to think. He rode the elevator up to the top floor and stood in his living room without turning on the lights. The city glittered and spread out below him through the glass walls, millions of lit windows, millions of lives moving through the dark. He thought about Elena at that table. You pay me to do a job. I do my job. 21 years. She had done her job and far more than her job. She had kept his son alive emotionally through the darkest years of their family's life. She had done it with such steadiness and such dignity that he had absorbed it the way you absorb warmth from a fire without ever thinking about the wood being burned. And while she had been keeping his home warm, her own life had been full of cold. He walked to his desk and sat down. He opened his laptop, not to read reports. Just to have something in front of him while his mind worked its way through what he now knew. He thought about Leo. 16 years old, lying in that hospital bed with an 4 in his arm, trying to sound cheerful for his grandmother. Wanting to study aerospace engineering. Fistfighting the future from a hospital pillow. He thought about what Elena had said near the end of their time in the coffee shop, when they were putting on their coats and the young man was wiping down the tables. I was going to work it out, she had said. I always work it out somehow. And she would have. Marcus believed that without question. Elena would have stretched and scraped and carried the weight until she found a way, because that was the kind of person she was. But she should not have had to. Marcus closed the laptop. He sat in the dark penthouse for a long time, the city burning quietly below him, and thought about the kind of man he wanted to be. He was at his desk by 5:30 the following morning. Not reading reports. He was on the phone. His first call was to Vivian Cross, his personal attorney, a precise and perceptive woman who had worked alongside him for 12 years and had long since learned to read meaning in the tone of his voice before he got to the substance. When she picked up and heard how he sounded, she did not ask unnecessary questions. She listened. "I need you to contact NYU Langone Medical Center," Marcus said. "Oncology unit. There's a patient, a 16-year-old named Leo Reyes. I want the complete picture of his treatment plan, the best available option, not the one tailored to what someone can afford. The best one they have." A pause. "And Vivian, I want this handled discreetly. My name does not appear anywhere on it yet. Are we clear?" "Perfectly clear," she said. "You'll have numbers by noon." He ended the call and sat back. Through the glass, the sky above the Hudson was turning from deep navy to a pale and tentative gray. The city pressing itself into another day. Marcus watched it and thought about Elena, who was probably already on the subway heading toward him, moving through the morning with that quiet steadiness of hers, not knowing he had been at this desk since before the sun came up, thinking about her grandson. If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment with "I'm still here." Let's see who's truly following this shocking story. Elena arrived at 7, as she always did. She was quieter than usual. She moved through the kitchen carefully, her eyes slightly lowered, her shoulders set with the particular tension of someone who does not know what the day is going to bring and is bracing for whatever it is. Marcus was standing at the kitchen counter when she came in. He was pouring his own coffee, which surprised her. He almost never did. "Elena," he said, before she could reach for her apron. "Last night. I want you to know that nothing between us is different. Your place in this home is not in question. I need you to believe that." Elena stopped with her apron half unfolded. She looked at him with an expression he could not entirely name. It was somewhere between relief and the guarded hope of someone who has been let down before and does not trust themselves to believe good news too quickly. "All right," she said quietly. "All right," he said. She finished with her apron. He took his coffee to his desk. The morning moved forward as mornings do, ordinary on the surface and entirely changed underneath. Vivian called at 11:52. Marcus closed his office door and listened carefully as she walked him through the numbers. The treatment the hospital had recommended for Leo's next phase was a targeted immunotherapy, newer and considerably more effective for his specific type of leukemia. The outcome statistics were meaningfully better than the standard option. It was also considerably more expensive. The distance between what Elena's insurance covered and what the treatment actually cost was wide enough to swallow everything she earned in over a year of work. "Can we move today?" Marcus asked. "We can move within the hour if you'd like," Vivian said. "Do it," Marcus said. "Full payment directly to the billing department. I want it structured as an anonymous donor contribution. Elena does not know it came from me." "Not yet." "I'll have it done this afternoon," Vivian said. He thanked her and set the phone down. He rested his hand on it for a moment. The feeling that moved through him was unlike anything he associated with closing a deal. That sensation was sharp and electric and satisfying in a cool, transactional way. This was warmer than that. Quieter. Like something that had been held too tightly inside his chest for the past 18 hours had been given permission to loosen. He picked up the phone again and called Kevin Marsh, his head of human resources, a methodical and reliable man who had been with Elliot for 9 years. "Kevin," Marcus said. "I need a full review of our healthcare coverage across every employee category. Every single tier. Corporate staff, support staff, drivers, contractors, domestic arrangements, everyone. I want to see precisely what we cover and precisely what we don't. I want it on my desk by Friday." A brief silence. "That's going to be a fairly extensive document, sir." "All categories?" "All of them," Marcus said. That evening, Elena gathered her things to leave at the usual time. She was almost at the door when Marcus called from his office. She stopped and looked back. He came to stand in the doorway, one hand resting on the frame, and for a moment he looked less like a man who owned a piece of the skyline and more like an ordinary man searching for the right words for something that didn't have easy ones. "How is Leo today?" he asked. 4 words. Elena blinked. It was such an unremarkable question in one sense and such an enormous one in another. Nobody had asked her that, not like that, not simply because they wanted to know, in a very long time. Her face did something soft and complicated. "He had a better day," she said. "He ate more at dinner. The nurses say that's a good sign." Marcus nodded. "Good," he said. "That's good, Elena." She nodded back. Then she picked up her bag and walked to the door. But just before she stepped out, she paused without turning around. "Thank you for asking," she said quietly. Then she was gone. Marcus stood in the office doorway for a long moment after the door closed. Then he went back to his desk, sat down, and opened the folder of reports he was 3 days behind on. He stared at the numbers. For the first time in his professional life, the numbers felt very small. 2 days later, Elena's phone buzzed in her apron pocket while she was wiping down the kitchen counters. She almost let it go. She never took personal calls during working hours. But something made her glance at the screen. It was the hospital billing office. Her stomach folded immediately. She pulled off one rubber glove and answered. "Mrs. Reyes." The woman's voice on the other end was businesslike but not unkind. "I'm calling regarding Leo Reyes in our oncology unit. Is this his grandmother?" "Yes," Elena said, and her voice came out smaller than she intended. "Is he all right? Has something?" "He's perfectly fine," the woman said quickly. "Leo is doing well. I'm calling about his account." She paused, a brief sound of pages. "It appears that the outstanding balance on his treatment plan, the full amount for the advanced therapy, has been settled. In its entirety. As of yesterday." Elena put her free hand on the counter. "I'm sorry," she said slowly. "Can you say that again?" The woman said it again. "All of it. Settled in full. Anonymous donor fund." Elena was fully covered for the complete treatment. "Did they leave a name?" Elena asked. The voice on her phone was steady, but her hand on the counter was not. "Who was it?" "The fund was submitted anonymously, Mrs. Reyes. We don't have a name to give you. But I wanted you to know right away. You don't have to worry about the financial side of Leo's treatment anymore." The call ended. Elena stood in Marcus Elliot's kitchen and did not move for a long time. The cleaning cloth was still in her other hand. The counters were half finished. Outside the glass, the city moved and hummed, indifferent as always to the enormous thing that had just happened to one woman standing very still on the 43rd floor. She had no proof. The hospital had said anonymous. But Elena had spent 21 years reading this household and the people inside it, learning the rhythms and the silences and the small telling details, and she knew. She knew the way you know something that you feel before you can explain it. She set down the cloth. She walked down the hallway and knocked twice on the open office door. Marcus looked up from his screen. Elena stood in the doorway. One rubber glove still on her hand, the other bare. Her eyes were very full of something she was working hard to contain. "Mr. Elliot," she said. Her voice was careful and precise, each word placed like something fragile. "The hospital just called me." Marcus said nothing. "They told me Leo's treatment has been paid for. All of it. By an anonymous donor." Still Marcus said nothing. But he did not look away from her. Elena took one slow breath. "Was it you?" she asked. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Yes." Just that. One word, plainly spoken, with nothing attached to it. No explanation. No list of justifications. No careful framing to make it sound like a business decision. Just the truth, because the truth didn't need anything around it. Elena stood in the doorway and pressed her lips together. Her chin moved slightly, that small involuntary tremor that happens when something long suppressed finally finds the crack it has been looking for. She had been steady for so long. Through Sophia's death she had been steady. Through Leo's diagnosis and every hard night of treatment that followed, she had been steady. She had held him through the worst of it without ever letting herself fall apart in front of him, because someone had to remain standing, and she had decided long ago that she was going to be that person. But something about one quiet word, said plainly by a man who could have said nothing and faced no consequence, broke through the wall she had spent 8 months building around herself. She did not collapse. Elena was not that kind of woman. But her eyes filled completely and 2 tears ran down her face before she could stop them, and she pressed the back of her rubber-gloved hand against her mouth and looked up at the ceiling the way people do when they are trying to gather themselves back from somewhere very far away. Marcus stood up from his desk. He did not offer anything clever. He did not reach for a tissue or prepare a speech. He simply stood, the way you stand when something real is happening, and staying seated no longer makes sense. "Elena," he said quietly. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" She lowered her hand from her mouth. She looked at him directly, her eyes still bright and wet, and she said something that stayed with Marcus for a very long time afterward. "Because in this house," she said, "I am the helper. That is my role. That is the only thing I have ever known how to be here." She paused. "I did not know how to be the one who needed help. I didn't know if I was allowed to be that." The room was quiet. The city hummed beyond the glass. The Hudson moved slowly in the distance. And Marcus Elliot stood behind his desk and understood something he had never quite understood before. That strength and silence are not the same thing. That the people who carry the heaviest burdens are often the ones carrying them precisely because they are strong enough to do so without making a sound. And that the world, and men like him, had grown very comfortable allowing that to continue. "You can be more than one thing in this house," he said. "That can change. Starting now." Elena looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded, once, small and careful, the way someone accepts something they are still learning they deserve. "Thank you," she said. "For Leo. I don't have the words for it." "You don't need words. Just let the boy get better." A breath of something close to a smile moved across Elena's face. Then she straightened her apron with both hands, one still gloved, one not, and said, "I have counters to finish." And she walked back down the hallway to the kitchen. Marcus sat back down at his desk. He did not open his laptop. He just sat with the feeling for a moment, without measuring it or managing it or turning it into anything useful, and decided that this was the right thing to do. If this hooked you already, don't forget to subscribe, like, and drop a comment, because what happens next will absolutely shatter your expectations. 3 days later, on a Saturday morning, Marcus did something unplanned and difficult to fully explain even to himself. He went to a small game shop on West 68th Street and bought a chess set. Not an impressive decorative one. Not the kind that lives in a penthouse and is never touched. A proper one, solid and real, with a good weighted board and pieces that had some heft to them. The man in the shop wrapped it in brown paper and tied it with string. Marcus stood on the pavement outside the shop holding the parcel and felt slightly ridiculous. He was a man who flew to Singapore to close deals and had been photographed on the covers of business publications. He was standing on a sidewalk holding a wrapped chess set, feeling uncertain. He had remembered something Elena said in the coffee shop the night everything had changed. She had been talking about Leo, not about his illness but about him, the person, the boy. She had mentioned it almost as an aside, the way you mention something that makes you quietly proud without wanting to make a production of it. "He beats everyone," she had said. "The nurses, the other patients, even one of the residents tried once. He says chess is the only game where being small doesn't matter." Marcus had filed that away in the part of his brain that filed everything, the part that never really switched off. He flagged it down a taxi to the hospital. Elena was already there when he arrived. She was sitting beside Leo's bed, carefully peeling a clementine, each segment released with the focused patience of someone who has made an art of small loving acts. The room smelled of citrus and antiseptic and something warm that Elena seemed to carry with her wherever she went. Leo was sitting up in bed, propped against the pillows. He had more color in his face than the last time Marcus had seen it, which had been through a gap in a hospital door on a Tuesday evening, which Marcus chose not to mention. Leo had his mother's dark eyes, sharp and quick, the kind that take in a room and categorize it almost before you realize you're being studied. He was thin, yes. The foreline was still in his arm. There was a softness around his face that came from months of treatment. But he sat up straight, and when Marcus appeared in the doorway holding a brown paper parcel, Leo looked at him with the open and uncomplicated curiosity of someone who had not yet decided what to make of him. Elena looked up. "Mr. Elliot," she said, with a mild note of surprise, the clementine half peeled in her hands. "I hope this is all right," Marcus said, which was not a phrase he used very often. He was a man who arrived places having confirmed every detail in advance. He was standing in a hospital doorway hoping it was all right. "Of course," Elena said, glancing briefly at Leo in the way that communicated without words, "be yourself." Leo looked at the parcel. "What's that?" "Chess set," Marcus said. Leo's face changed. Not politely. Genuinely, the way a 16-year-old's face lights up when something actually interests them before they learn to conceal it. "Are you any good?" Leo asked. Marcus set the parcel down on the edge of the bed and took the chair on the other side. "I haven't played in probably 15 years, he said. Leo grinned. It was a wide, slightly lopsided grin that took over his whole face. "Perfect," he said. "I like winning." Elena turned to look out the window, her shoulders shaking with silent laughter, which was a sound Marcus realized he had almost never heard inside his own home, and which struck him now as one of the finest sounds he had ever let himself miss. They played for 2 hours. Leo won the first game in just over 25 moves, calmly placing his queen, saying checkmate in an even voice, and immediately beginning to reset the pieces with the practiced hands of someone who had done this many times. Marcus studied the board. "Show me what I did wrong," he said. Leo looked up. Most adults in his experience, he would explain later to Elena, did not ask to be shown what they did wrong. They made excuses or changed the subject. "Okay," Leo said. And then he walked Marcus through it, move by move, pointing to each square, explaining the logic behind each piece's position with a patience and precision that made Marcus think more than once that this boy had the kind of mind that would one day build remarkable things. The second game lasted considerably longer. Marcus lost again, but by less. "You learn fast," Leo said, setting up the board again. "I've had to," Marcus said. Leo considered this. "What do you do?" he asked. Not with the particular reverence that people sometimes showed when they realized who Marcus was. Just a genuine question. "I run a technology company. Software that helps businesses move things efficiently around the world." Leo nodded, processing this. "Like logistics? Finding the fastest path from one place to another while clearing away whatever's blocking it?" "Essentially, yes." "That's chess," Leo said, tapping the board. "You're always trying to move efficiently toward the goal while stopping your opponent from doing the same thing." Marcus looked at the board. Then at Leo. "I have never thought of it quite like that." Leo shrugged, the easy shrug of someone who connects things naturally and doesn't consider it remarkable. "Abuela says I overthink everything." "Your abuela," Marcus said, glancing at Elena, who was pretending to read a magazine with great dedication, "is right about most things." Elena turned a page without looking up, but her mouth curved at the corner. When visiting hours ended and Marcus stood to leave, Leo held his hand out across the board. Marcus shook it. The grip was firm for someone in a hospital bed. Another thing filed away. "Same time next week?" Leo asked. Casual, almost offhand. But his eyes were doing something underneath the casual, watching carefully in the way that people watch when they have lost enough to have learned not to assume. Marcus looked at him. "Same time next week," he said. And he meant it. Elena walked him to the door of the room. In the hallway, she stopped and looked up at him with an expression that had traveled a very long way from the frightened, careful face she had worn on the pavement outside this same hospital 2 weeks ago. "He likes you," she said. Simply. "I like him," Marcus said. Also simply. Also true. He walked back through the quiet corridor toward the exit, and the city broke open around him as he stepped outside, loud and fast and entirely itself. But Marcus walked through it differently than he had walked through anything in a long time. He walked like someone paying attention. The report Kevin Marsh delivered on Friday was 51 pages. Marcus read every page on Saturday evening immediately after returning from the hospital, still in his coat, not even stopping to make coffee. He read it the way he had read reports in Elion's early years, when every line felt personal, when he felt responsible for every number on every page. He felt responsible now. The picture the report painted was not catastrophic. Elion was not a negligent company. It paid fair wages, met every legal requirement, scored reasonably well on industry benchmarks. By the standards of the business world, Marcus had built something decent. Decent, he was learning, was an embarrassingly low bar. The report showed that senior corporate employees had comprehensive healthcare coverage, low deductibles, strong prescription plans, mental health provisions. The kind of coverage that meant if something went wrong, you called your doctor and got it handled and moved on. If you're still here, subscribe, because stories like this only work when people stay. But move further down the chart, past the mid-level employees, past the support staff, past the drivers and the building workers and the front desk staff and the people who showed up every single day and kept the whole operation functioning at its foundations, and the coverage became thinner. High deductibles. Limited prescriptions. Gaps wide enough that a serious diagnosis could become a financial catastrophe before you had time to understand what was happening to you. Marcus set the report down and thought about Elena. Elena, whose staffing arrangement meant she fell technically outside Elion's direct employment structure, leaving her with a basic plan she paid for herself from her own salary. A plan that, when her grandson got sick, turned out to cover considerably less than she had believed and nowhere near enough. He turned to a section near the back. Kevin had included a brief employee survey, flagged in the margin with a note, low response rate, employees may have felt uncomfortable disclosing. Even so, nearly 30% of respondents below a certain salary threshold reported having experienced significant financial hardship related to medical expenses in the past 2 years. Nearly a third. And they had answered knowing someone might read it. Marcus set the report on his desk and stood at the window for a long time. The city did what it always did. He looked at it and thought about what Leo had said during their chess game. You're always trying to move efficiently toward the goal while clearing away whatever's blocking it. Marcus had built Elliot on exactly that principle. Efficiency, forward motion, removing obstacles. He had been exceptionally good at it. He had moved his company forward for 20 years with extraordinary precision. But he had been playing the wrong board. The real game, the one that actually mattered, was not about outmaneuvering competitors or hitting quarterly targets. It was about the people on both sides of the board. About making sure that the people who showed up every day and made all of this possible had enough left at the end of the month to take care of the people they loved. He had optimized everything except that. He went back to his desk and started writing. The executive team assembled Monday morning at 9 sharp. 6 people, 4 women and 2 men, all experienced, all sharp, all very good at their respective jobs. They arrived with tablets and coffee and the particular alertness of people summoned to a meeting with no agenda who had learned to prepare for anything. Marcus was already in the room. Standing at the window, not at the head of the table, which several of them noticed and filed away. When everyone was seated, he turned around. He had no presentation. No slides, no graphics. He had the 51-page report, printed, 1 copy in front of each chair. Pages 33 through 38, he said. Take 5 minutes. The sound of pages turning. He waited. He watched their faces. After 5 minutes he spoke again. I want to rebuild our healthcare structure, he said. Every tier, every employee category, including support staff and everyone covered under affiliated contracting arrangements. I want comprehensive coverage, low deductibles, strong prescription and mental health provisions. And I want the gap between what we offer at the top of this company and what we offer at the bottom to close significantly. Silence. Claire Huang, his chief financial officer, looked up from the report with her pen already in hand. Marcus, the cost projection on something this broad. I know, he said. We're talking about a material annual increase in. I know, Claire. She paused. You want me to run the scenarios? I've already run them, he said. He slid a single sheet down the table toward her. That's a rough model. I'm asking you to tell me how we absorb it, not whether we should. Claire took the sheet and read it. The room was quiet. The city was a low murmur far below. Adrian Cole, his chief operating officer, a careful and deliberate man, leaned forward. "What brought this to your attention?" he asked. Genuinely, not as a challenge. Marcus looked at him. He could have given a business rationale. Retention, productivity, social responsibility metrics. All of those things would have been true, and all of them would have satisfied the room without requiring anything personal. Instead, he said, "Someone who has worked for me for 21 years has been managing a private crisis alone for 8 months. And I didn't know because I never looked." He paused. "I'm looking now. What I'm seeing is that we have a responsibility we have not been meeting." The room was still. Adrian nodded slowly and said nothing, but his expression said that he found the answer complete. Rachel Kim, head of people and culture, spoke carefully. "If we're doing this properly," she said, "I'd like to propose an emergency assistance fund alongside the coverage changes. A separate pool for employees when something falls between the cracks. A gap in coverage, an unexpected cost, something the insurance doesn't reach." "Yes," Marcus said immediately. "Add it." "And genuine paid family medical leave," Rachel continued, with more confidence now. "We currently offer the legal floor. If an employee's child or parent is seriously ill." "Add that too," Marcus said. Claire was writing rapidly. "Marcus," she said without looking up, "the board is going to push back on this. The cost impact on projections over the next 2 years is going to be a real conversation." Marcus looked at her calmly. "We sent 11 people to a conference in Singapore last quarter on a private charter," he said. "I approved that without a second thought. The cost of that trip could have funded most of what we're discussing for an entire year." He let it sit. "If we can afford private jets, Claire, we can afford to do this." Claire looked at him for a long moment. Then she clicked her pen. "All right," she said. "Let's build the model." The meeting ran 3.5 hours. The team pushed back where they needed to, asked hard questions where they should have, and by the end moved toward what Marcus was asking for. Not blindly, but with the deliberate momentum of people who had been shown something true and had the integrity to act on it. As they were filing out, Adrian stopped beside Marcus at the window. "The person you mentioned," he said quietly. "Are they going to be all right?" Marcus looked out at the city. "They will be," he said. Adrian rested a hand briefly on his shoulder, a simple and uncomplicated gesture, and walked out. Marcus stood at the window alone and let himself feel what he felt without translating it into anything else. It felt, he decided, exactly like the right thing. Weeks passed. Weeks that don't announce themselves as significant while they're happening but that you understand later were quietly building something permanent. Leo started his advanced treatment the week after Marcus made the call to Vivian. The new therapy was harder. There were difficult days when he didn't eat and the light bothered him and he lay quiet and still in a way that pulled at something deep inside Elena every time she sat beside him. She sat with him through those days and held his hand and did not try to fill the silence, because she had learned that sometimes the most important thing love can do is make sure someone knows they are not alone in the dark. Marcus came every Saturday. He left the chess set on the shelf beside Leo's bed so it was always ready. One of the weekend nurses, a young man named Marcus whose name was a small coincidence that Leo found amusing, started hanging back at the end of his rounds to watch them play. Eventually Leo told him to sit down, and he became a rotating third player, subbing in when Leo wanted a different opponent or when Marcus needed a moment to think without being beaten. "You're actually getting better," Leo told Marcus one afternoon about 5 weeks in. "Try not to sound quite so shocked," Marcus said. "I'm not shocked. I'm just documenting it." Leo moved his rook across the board with the smooth certainty of someone who had already mapped the next 6 moves. "You still protect your king too conservatively. That's generally considered sound strategy. Only if you're playing to avoid losing," Leo said. "If you want to actually win, you have to accept some risk. You have to give something up to gain something." Marcus looked at the board. Then at the boy in the bed. "Where did you learn to think like that?" Leo shrugged. "Abuela, mostly. She doesn't play chess. But she talks about life the same way. She's one of the wisest people I know," Marcus said, and glanced toward Elena, who was reading a book with the studied attention of someone who was listening to every word. "She's the strongest person there is," Leo said simply. And then he took Marcus's bishop without ceremony and said, "Check." Elena changed too, in ways that arrived quietly and then weren't quiet at all. She arrived in the mornings with something lighter about her. Not dramatically, Elena was never dramatic, but Marcus noticed it the way you notice a room when someone has opened a window. She laughed more easily, a real laugh, low and warm, surfacing when something genuinely amused her. She offered opinions when he asked for them instead of deferring. She told him once that the succulent on his windowsill was receiving far too much direct sunlight and would not survive the spring unless he moved it. He moved it. It thrived. Small things. The small things were the whole point. One morning, roughly 2 months after everything had changed, Marcus came into the kitchen to find Elena at the stove cooking breakfast. Not his usual sparse and minimal meal. She was making eggs with roasted peppers and herbs, the kind of thing that fills a kitchen with a smell so warm and alive that it stopped him in the doorway. "I hope this is all right," she said without turning around. "Leo told me last week that you mentioned you hadn't eaten a real breakfast in years. He said, and I am quoting him precisely, that this was a genuine tragedy and someone should do something about it." Marcus sat down at the counter. He's not wrong. She set the plate in front of him. He ate at the counter while she made her tea, and they talked. Not about the household schedule or the weekly shopping. About Leo. About a documentary he had watched and wanted to discuss with Marcus. About the chess tournament one of the hospital recreation staff was organizing among the long-term patients. An ordinary conversation, the most ordinary kind. And the first real one they had ever had. On a Thursday afternoon in late April, Leo was declared to be in full remission. Elena called Marcus from the hospital. He was in the middle of a call with partners in London, and when her name appeared on his phone, he ended the other call without deliberation, something that had never happened before in 20 years of building a company, and answered. "He's in remission," Elena said. She was crying. Not quietly, not with her usual composure. She was crying the way a person cries when they have been holding their breath for 8 months and have finally been told they are allowed to breathe again. Marcus sat at his desk and listened. He said nothing for a moment because nothing he could say would be large enough for what she was feeling. Then he said, "I'll be there in 20 minutes. He arrived in 16. The hospital had a rooftop terrace on the 8th floor, a small outdoor space with benches and raised planters and a low railing overlooking the city. A nurse had mentioned it to Elena weeks ago, but she had never gone up. Visiting it had felt too much like hoping, and hoping had felt dangerous while everything was still uncertain. Today, Leo wanted to go. He walked to the elevator in his hospital gown with a light jacket over his shoulders that Elena had brought from home, his fore disconnected for the hour, his steps careful but deliberate. He walked between Elena and Marcus, and when they stepped out onto the terrace into the late afternoon light, he went straight to the railing and stood there looking out. New York was doing something remarkable with the light. The kind of sunset the city occasionally produces without warning, deep amber at the horizon climbing through rose and into the deepening blue of early evening, the buildings catching it on their windows and throwing it back in broken, glittering pieces across the whole skyline. Leo stood at the railing and was quiet for a long time. Then he said, without turning around, "Abuela. Look at that." Elena came to stand beside him. She put her arm around his shoulders and he leaned into her slightly, the way children lean into the people who are home for them, even when they are nearly grown, even when they would never admit it anywhere else. Marcus stood a little behind them. He had looked at this city from above many times. From boardrooms and penthouse terraces and the windows of helicopters and the rooftops of parties where everyone was loud and beautiful and competing to be noticed. He had looked at this skyline and seen what he had built, or what he owned, or how far he had traveled from that small apartment in Brooklyn with the cold coffee and the second-hand laptop. He did not see that tonight. Tonight he saw what Elena saw when she looked at it. What Leo saw. A city where ordinary people lived and loved each other through impossible things, carrying weight that no skyline could see, moving through corridors that no penthouse could overlook, fighting quiet wars in quiet rooms and still showing up the next morning. He had followed Elena into one of those corridors. And everything that mattered had been waiting there. Elena turned and looked at him. The sunset was warm on her face. Her eyes were dry now but soft in a way that the last 8 months had earned. "You followed me," she said. "Because you thought I was hiding something from you." Marcus met her eyes. Yes, he said. She was quiet for a moment. Below them, the city lit itself window by window as the day ended. Leo was still looking at the horizon, giving them this moment without being asked to, because he was 16 and had lived through enough to understand when something important was being said. Elena said softly. I was hiding all of it. Every day. Marcus nodded. He understood that. He had done the same thing, for years, in his own way. Hidden in his glass penthouse above the world, surrounded by efficiency and control and the satisfying noise of achievement, hiding from the vulnerability of truly needing people, hiding from the responsibility of truly seeing them. You don't have to do that anymore, he said. Not in this family. Elena looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded once, small and careful, like someone accepting something they are still in the process of believing they deserve. She turned back toward the railing. Toward the city, toward the light, toward her grandson standing at the edge of the rooftop looking out at everything still ahead of him. The three of them stood there as the sun finished going down. The man who had built something above the city and the woman who had held a family together inside it and the boy who had taught them both that you have to risk something to win something. That staying protected is not the same as being alive. Below them, the city came fully to light, window by window, the way it always did. Millions of lights, millions of people, millions of lives moving through the dark and the noise toward whatever came next. And Marcus Elliot stood on that rooftop and for the first time in a very long time felt like one of them. Not above it. Inside it. Belonging to it. And that, he had finally learned, was the only place worth being. I hope this story stayed with you the way it stayed with me. Please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and let us know in the comments what it made you think about. And tell us where you're watching from. We will see you in the next one.